This is a win for the Sixers, though. The patience paid off. If people were saying back in October they could have taken Harrison Barnes, they got James Harden because they waited for this moment. This is what they were waiting for, and it happened. Like, this is a huge win for the Sixers, even despite giving up Seth Curry. You got James Harden.
Mahoney, what kind of James Harden are they getting?
A kind. I think a decent one. I think between what we've seen from James before he started sitting out this recent stretch of games, we saw a version that was a little more close to his all-NBA self, a little bit closer to his superstar self, a guy who could, on this team, in this context, be an anchor for a team that could go to the East Finals and beyond. And I think the key to understanding that, the key to understanding his fit with Embiid and all these pieces, like, he's just a phenomenally talented creator that's going to change so much of what the Sixers do and what they have to do and what Embiid has to carry. He recontextualizes their whole team, even if he's not the exact player we saw 3-4 years ago in the MVP race.
The exact size player. Chris Ryan, it's time. Diehard Philadelphia 76ers. On so many Ringer podcasts, we really treat ourselves to a Chris Ryan appearance here on the BS podcast. You know, you're all over the place. You're like one of those A-list rappers that just hops on other people's tracks all the time. I'm always afraid to book you.
You can't afford me. My feature fee is way too high for you.
So Ben Simmons quits on your team during the Atlanta series.
I recall that, Bill. Thank you.
I don't know if you remember that part. And Doc Rivers hurts his feelings. Clutch gets involved, and he just decides, I'm not playing anymore. I'm going to take my ball and go home. Mm-hmm. At any point, did you think James Harden was going to come out of this?
No. Absolutely not. We were talking about like DeJounte Murray and Jakob Poeltl and like some pick swaps. We were talking about CJ McCollum and Robert Covington. We were talking about 80 cents on the dollar. But Dealer Daryl, you know, and let me tell you this, Bill, I defy you to go back through my last 10 years of written work or podcasting. I've always loved James Harden. I've always loved his game. I think his commitment to his teams is unquestioned. I think his MRIs are always just, they look like rainbows popping out of a meadow. I'm sure that his left hand is fine. His right hamstring is fine, whatever. Yeah, this is why you move mountains to get Daryl Morey, because Daryl Morey can move mountains. Like, because this is the kind of trade that he can make. I probably at various points had talked myself into Domantas Sabonis or talked myself into CJ McCollum or talked myself into DeJounte Murray. But James Harden is an objective upgrade over Ben Simmons. He got a better player for the player he traded.
Well, so KOC, you assume Ben Simmons is never coming back, right? If you're Philly, you're making this trade. So really the upgrade is James Curry for Seth Curry to James Harden would be the upgrade, unless there's a scenario that the trade deadline passes and then Simmons never, you know, he basically is like, all right, fine, I'll play. I'm costing myself too much money. And then you have the Simmons Curry situation. You have Simmons being interjected into this weird season, the Embiid stuff, the Doc Rivers stuff. So on paper, Harden is much better than Seth Curry. With that said, I really like the way Seth Curry and Joel Embiid played together. And I thought Seth Curry was really valuable for them. And he was able to move. And we've seen Embiid. We talked about this little Sunday night, the little dribble handoffs that Embiid can do, all this stuff. I don't see Harden with a lot of movement. So I guess we've never seen Harden with a center.
He's been saving it. He's been saving it up.
That's the case. But James Harden with a center, I assume we see point guard James. Mahoney, I'm going to come to you after this, but what version of James do we see with James Harden? With Joel Embiid?
So with James Harden, I mean, like, you're not going to see the motion. You're not going to see the movement of Seth Curry. It's just going to be something different. You're going to see Joel Embiid doing different things as well, because with Embiid, he's never had a playmaking point guard like James Harden, and that's why, like, I've been so excited about the idea of this. Harden gets to play with a big for the first time that has the impact and the ability of Joel Embiid, and Embiid gets a playmaker like Harden. You're going to see those guys run a lot more pick and roll together. I mean, to me, like, that's the first thing Doc Rivers and that coaching staff needs to integrate is, like, how can we design like pick and roll plays to maximize this Harden and Embiid combination? So you're going to see less handoff actions, maybe more pick and roll. I think that's the way you'll see it distributed.
But Mahoney, is that good to screw with how incredible Embiid's been this year? I mean, if the season that is today is the MVP, and now you're bringing somebody who Embiid has to adjust to.
I think he has to adjust to him, but there's nothing wrong with diversifying a little bit of what Embiid does, just because there's so many possessions where he has to catch it 18, 20 feet from the basket and just make something happen. Those are now James Harden possessions, or they're pick and roll possessions involving them both. And we've had so much time to stew on what these two guys could look like together. I keep coming further and further toward the idea of Joel Embiid as just like 7-foot Chris Paul, basically, as a James Harden partner. The idea that these guys, they intersect, they're a big and a guard, they're going to run pick and roll. But the Sixers are going to be defined by how dominant those guys can be individually in their spaces. Harden on the perimeter, Embiid on the block. They're going to have tons of isolation opportunities still and post-up opportunities still. And if they can be as good as CP and Harden were together, the Sixers are going to be a dominant team, at least on that side of the ball.
Chris, are you excited that one of the preeminent playoff losers of our lifetime, James Harden, is being paired up with the guy who has lost more Game 7s and blown 3-1 leads than any coach in NBA history, Doc Rivers? Do you think that it cancels each other out? Is it two wrongs make a right?
You're such a prick. I thought you were going to ask me a real question. Of course I'm worried about that. Yeah, I'm worried about it. Yeah.
What
I'm
could
really
go
worried
wrong?
about it.
I mean, Doc Rivers he gets along with his players and nothing bad ever happens. James Harden is always so reliable in the playoff rounds.
Well, look, I mean, I think that the one thing you get going for you here is that Harden is going to be, I think, on what constitutes for him best behavior, right? So he comes into a situation where he is essentially asked out of two teams in 2 years to get to
2 years,
Philly.
1 year.
In 1 year, 2 seasons. I want to know, what is the bond between Harden and Morey? Have we ever seen a star player and a GM have this kind of relationship where the guy is like, I'm going to go to a team where I might be a part of the most intoxicating, historically efficient supernova offense in NBA history, but what I really want to do is hang out with Daryl. I'm actually just like mystified as to why Harden is like, forget the Kyrie stuff, forget the KD's being hurt stuff. Joe Harris isn't coming back. Did he really not want to run Steve Nash's offense? Did he really want more ISOs? Like, what is the like gravitational pull that Morey and Harden have for one another? I obviously feel like the Sixers are going to benefit from it, but I'm really curious if we've never seen this before, where a star player is like, wherever that GM goes, I follow.
How much of it is Daryl? Is it just Daryl Morey, or is it like Tad Brown and Meek Mill and Michael Rubin and like Joel Embiid as well?
Say that sentence like one more time, just to like live it a little bit.
It's so cliche when KOC drops those names all
No,
in a
but
row.
it's like,
no, it's the truth though.
What planet are we on? Is it Meek Mill and Michael Rubin?
I'm just saying, like in terms of relationships, that matters. But what really makes it appealing is Joel Embiid. Like, you can have all those relationships that talk you into something, but the real appeal is the product on the court itself. Mm-hmm. And I think the stuff that you mentioned, Chris, does matter. Like, I don't think we can forget the fact that James Harden has to, play with a part-time player and KD's out. I think all of these factors have to be in consideration. Like, it makes sense. Forget about all the relationships and all that for basketball reasons. To me, like Rob said, the interior force of Joel Embiid and the perimeter that James Harden provides, those guys together, like on paper, if they buy in completely, that could be a perfect match. Like, Harden has to see that, and maybe the relationships help talk him into that. But like what they're talking about, like there's something actually real there, is my underlying point here.
No,
it's
and
real.
I agree with you. It's just, it's not like he's leaving the Pacers. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I'm just surprised that he would be in a situation like Brooklyn, and that Brooklyn, in those brief moments we saw of the Brooklyn trio together, it was like, well, this will be unsolvable. Like, this is like, you can't guard this team. There will always be an open shooter, and the shooters that they have will make those shots. And obviously, I think that they were so top heavy, and they bet on a bunch of veterans that didn't pan out, or Blake Griffin collapsed, and Millsap, and like all the guys that they were like, we can get some juice here and there from these guys, a couple of minutes here and there. It didn't work out this season. And the Kyrie situation wound up metastasizing. But I'm kind of surprised. I mean, like I'm flattered. It's awesome that he's like Philly is the spot to be. Yeah, like I'm flattered that somebody would be like, I'm going to Philadelphia. Like I want to get traded away from Kevin Durant to go to play in Philadelphia.
Mahoney, any case that there's some buyer's remorse here for Harden with how this played out, where he had a choice between Philly and the Nets, right? For basically that first month of the NBA season, it became this two-team race to try to get him. And he picks Durant. And from everything I heard, it was Durant pushing. It was Durant and Harden together, them trying to convince Joe Tsai the week of to finally make the move, to throw in a little more. Finally, the Nets throw in more to make the trade. He ends up going there. And I wonder at what point Harden reached where he goes, what did I do? It's probably this year, right? It's probably when the Kyrie stuff snowballs. But was it last year? Was it this year? Because Jackie, when KOC and I were on with her a couple of days ago, she was saying how, by all accounts, and KOC was agreeing, that it was kind of Harden's was the leader of last year's team in a lot of ways. Like he was the rock. So do you think this was all Kyrie related, or what would have been the other factors here?
Well, immediately this goes down as one of the great what ifs of NBA history. If those three guys had been able to be on the court and healthy in last year's playoffs, this season, because we'll never see it again. We'll never get the chance to see a super team that barely had a chance to play together at all. I think Simmons is going to be a really great fit, but them not getting a real crack at this, I find it hard not to place some blame on Kyrie. I don't think we get here if Kyrie Irving is a full-time, fully active member of the Brooklyn Nets. I just don't think that happens. I don't think the frustration levels reach the way they do. I don't think the losing streaks reach the way they do. Maybe it's unfair to place the blame solely on him because there's obviously more complicated factors in play here, but it's tough to read this situation, whether you're looking at Harden's buyer's remorse or the Nets buyer's remorse or however you want to panel it. Kyrie has to be a central figure to receive some blame in exactly the way things have gone down. That said, maybe the Nets win the championship with Ben Simmons. I don't know. He's kind of exactly what they need in very different ways.